Have you ever considered taking a mental health day from work, school, or visiting the in laws? Of course you have. Well, this podcast is for you.
Your podcast starts in 3, 2, 1.
Oh.
Good morning, Doctor. Time to wake up.
Oh. Well, thank you, Ivan. It's going to be a great day at the Mental Health Day podcast. I'm Todd Finnerty. I'm a clinical psychologist, and welcome to the Mental Health Day podcast number 1, coming to you from the G. Stanley Hall. This is an approximately weekly podcast, and it's for anyone who's ever considered taking a mental health day, and frankly, that's each one of us. It's a blend of humor and information that can benefit all of us. In this first podcast, we have an incredible interview that I'm really excited about. Dr. Don Meichenbaum. Dr. Meichenbaum is a clinical psychologist and was voted one of the 10 most influential psychotherapists of the 20th century. He's also one of the founders of cognitive behavioral therapy and is the research director for the Melissa Institute for Violence Prevention. I recently spoke to Dr. Meichenbaum about how you and I can be more resilient. Here it goes.
Hi, Don Meichenbaum here.
Hey, good to talk to you.
Yeah, good. Glad to have the opportunity. Thanks for the invite.
No, of course. Well, I just started recording already. And that's
Want
okay.
to check to see if it's working?
Yeah, it's working. It's working.
Okay.
I can see the printout now.
Before we get going, I'm just kind of curious. How did you get this thing from APA?
Oh, you know what? It came through my state psych association, and so it's a weird. The APA Public Education Coordinator. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah, it's sort of like a hybrid. It's sort of the funds for it kind of come from APA, but it's sort of housed in the Ohio Psychological Association, and each state psychological association has one that sort of is the official coordinator that APA actually pays for. And then not
So how many of these do you do?
These podcasts? Well, this is a new thing that I just started, so you get to be the number one.
Oh my God, I'm the virgin of them.
You're the very first podcast.
So when does this actually go out? What happens to the interview that we're doing?
Hopefully, I will have it up next week, depending on.
And how does it get advertised? How do people?
Well, it'll be on iTunes and www.mentalhealthday.org. We'll go out and people will be able to subscribe to it. It's a podcast. So
do they have to pay for it, or is it freebie?
No, it's free. And people can subscribe, and it'll go right to their smartphones if they want.
Oh wow!
You know what I mean? Or you can have a reader on your computer that'll help you. So some people, the majority of people do podcasts through iTunes. I have an Android app called Beyond Pod, I believe. So
okay. Well, you're well beyond my level of technology, but when you do put out the announcement, could you send me a copy?
Absolutely.
Great. That way I can get my kids to listen to it.
It sounds good.
Or my grandkids, they're into it more than I am. Okay, so I'm all yours, and tell me how we should proceed.
Well, I'm excited. We'll just get started, right? I'm excited to talk to you, Donald Meichenbaum. I think there's not many people who can say they're a founder of CBT and also one of the 10 most influential psychotherapists of the 20th century, right? So it's great to be talking to you. I think you are also the research director of the Melissa Institute for Violence Prevention, and you also just wrote a book, right? Roadmap to Resilience, where you can see www.roadmaptoresilience.org is where people can find that. And with all the trauma in the news lately, like Hurricane Sandy, the Newtown shootings. I think it's a great time to be talking about resilience. What do you think about some of the...
Yeah, well, as you know, this is a challenging times, and given the number of natural disasters, whether it's Hurricane Sandy or Katrina, whether it's in trauma due to intentional human design like shootings in Aurora or Newtown, or the variety of violent episodes that people experience in one form or another, there's a remarkable story to be told. And that's what I've been listening to for the last several years. Last couple of years, I've been spending time with returning soldiers from Iraq and Afghanistan. I've dealt with the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, the terrorist attack in New York City, the bombings in Oklahoma City, Columbine shootings, and so forth. And one of the fascinating things is that no matter which area of trauma one looks at, natural or man-made, the fascinating tale is that the research indicates that no matter what the nature of the trauma is, while people are impacted and experience emotional reactions and the like afterwards, in about 70% of the cases, people go on to show remarkable resilience, or the ability to bounce back, to endure adversities. And maybe we can take a moment to talk about what distinguishes the 70% versus the 30% who may show more persistent clinical challenges. In the book that you refer to on Roadmap to Resilience, I have indicated 6 domains where people can boast of resilience, and be happy to chat with you about what is resilience, and moreover, what's the evidence for resilience both in civilian populations, military, and how people can strengthen their resilience, some of the misconceptions therein. So why don't you focus me on which of those areas where we should begin the process?
Well, how do we know, first of all, that resilience exists?
Well, one of the things that happens is that in the aftermath of some kind of traumatic or victimizing experience, you can document, both in terms of self-report and behavioral manifestations, how people respond. So, for example, if you look at how people function in the aftermath of very traumatic events, whether it's the tsunamis that occurred in Southeast Asia, where anywhere from 70,000 people in China died, or in the aftermath of the tsunamis in Southeast Asia, when people go in to systematically assess them on psychiatric scales, what you find is, in most instances, just like 12 to 15% of people meet a diagnostic criteria. Now, when I say that they don't have mental disorders or psychiatric disturbance and so forth, that doesn't mean that immediately in the aftermath of these kinds of events, people won't have negative emotions or be behavioral dysfunction. In fact, one of the things that's fascinating, apropos of your question, is that both positive and negative emotions can coexist. Resilience is not a black and white, either-or kind of process. People may be resilient in one domain of their lives and not at others. Resilience is a dominant characteristics. People who have studied this have indicated that it's not a rare and exceptional event. Moreover, we know what aspects actually contribute to resilience. One of the things that we note is that there are certain kinds of building blocks that contribute to resilience, and we also have some notion about what people do that gets them stuck in terms of the degree to which they avoid behaviors, the way in which they fail to self-disclose, the way in which they don't use social supports, the way in which they feel continued threatened in the aftermath of a traumatic event, like the shooting in Newtown and so forth, one's whole sense of beliefs and trust gets significantly challenged. And not to downplay the level of loss and grief and pain that people experience, and this will last me even a lifetime. But in spite of, and that's the key phrase, in spite of those kinds of traumatic events, the loss of property in New York City after Hurricane Sandy in New Jersey and Connecticut and so forth, or in the loss of personal lives and children, somehow people are able to move on, to keep going. They're able to develop a kind of coherent story where that traumatic event becomes incorporated into an entire autobiographical memory. You see, Todd, we're all storytellers. And my research and what I highlight in the Roadmap to Resilience book is that the nature of the stories that people tell themselves and tell others will determine the degree to which they're able to incorporate the traumatic event. Remember, the notion is thou shalt not forget. It's not trying to avoid or suppress, but how do you transform? How do you find meaning? Here's one example. The major way that people in North America cope with traumatic events is to use some form of spirituality or religious kind of activity. Being part of a community, of transforming, of paying homage, of doing the work of grief, and so forth, all facilitate individuals coming back from these kinds of traumatic events. So what I'm saying is, if you look at people in North America, some 60% of them will have a traumatic event occur in their lives. But yet, only 5 to 10% will develop clinical problems that need mental health assistance. That people who have post-traumatic stress disorders or other kinds of psychiatric problems, they reflect a disorder of non-recovery. That in the aftermath of traumatic events, most people will be impacted, but they recover, and in some instances they even go on and develop a kind of what is called post-traumatic growth. They find a new appreciation for life. They have a set of values that they then make a gift of to others. They memorialize, they honor. They engage in a whole variety of activities. They see new possibilities. They have a greater appreciation for life.
I saw on your website that you had a number of people that were sharing their stories, and not so much just their stories, but I think ideas that help them achieve some of that post-traumatic growth that you were talking about. And I think there was even an email, I think it was examples at roadmaptoresilience.org. So people can actually go onto your website and read some of the things that other people found helpful. And I kind of like that about your website. And also, if somebody has gone through it and found something that they thought was helpful, they could send an email and have that anonymously included on your website. And I thought that was a great thing.
Yeah, the intent is to go viral, to invite the readers of the Roadmap to Resilience book to share their examples of true grit. And I mean, these are heartening. I've spent the last few years listening to returning soldiers and other individuals who have been victimized tell their story. And it's interesting that sharing the story as compared to keeping it a secret is a key coping technique. In fact, writing about it or sharing the story or transforming the story becomes really an important healing element to this. Any attempts to avoid, to try and suppress thoughts, to withdraw, seems to have a boomerang effect and make people worse. So if one goes to the website You can read other people's accounts of resilience engendering behavior. For instance, I was moved by the mother who submitted the example of her son who was a firefighter in the aftermath of 9/11, and he died, and they never really found his body. But over the course of a period of time, they would find body parts and call this mother. And you could imagine the enduring kind of pain that would bring. She has decided, as she notes in the website, to collect the pieces of the body, and she will bury it in the casket with her when she dies. I mean, these are remarkably poignant accounts, and it's not only the layperson I have there. Some leading psychotherapists who have gone through mental illness, disorder, suicidal ideation, who then were able to keep going and contribute, of transforming their story and their pain into a way of helping others, of how to make a gift. Those individuals who get stuck tend to have more fragmented, lacking coherence, having lack of a beginning, middles, and ends to their account. They have difficulty to integrate it, to make that part of their whole life story as compared to the defining element. They may get stuck in thinking traps of feeling that they're a burden on others and that others would be better off without them, of not feeling you could trust anyone and the like. And I enumerate the variety. So the goal here is to help people become a thought detective, to talk back to the emotional part of their brain in order to be more cognitively flexible. Once again, after a tragedy like Newtown, there is no cure. There's no magic bullet. There's no kind of fix. But everybody has the potential of becoming more resilient in their efforts, and they need to do it often with the help of others.
That makes sense. Now, in your book, you talk about 6 domains of resilience, or ways to boost our resilience in those 6 domains. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. The 6 domains that we enumerate is, first of all, physical, like, for example, how to maintain your body in terms of sleep behavior and exercise, enjoying nature. Interpersonal. This has to do with the way in which you access supports, the way in which you might seek assistance, the way in which you can maintain a better relationship with significant others, like one's spouse, how to become a better social problem solver. Then there's emotional. And in emotional, there are 2 kinds of domains of ways to bolster your resilience. One is to improve positive emotions, the kind of bucket list, the kinds of things that you cherish, that you find valuable, and how to re-engage life, and how to set new appreciation for life, whether it's a sunset or a work of art. The other is how to regulate negative emotions. This may be the sense of guilt or shame or anger. It might be a sense of anxiety and depression that people experience in the aftermath of tragedy. And as you noted, one of the things that I've been involved in is cognitive behavior therapy, to have people appreciate the interconnection between the way in which they see things, what they say to themselves, their emotions and behaviors, how they get into a kind of vicious cycle, and how they can learn better ways to interrupt that cycle. If they're physiologically aroused, then how can they use tactical breathing and relaxation? If their mind is racing to the past or in the future, how can they use mindfulness kind of activities and stay in the moment? The way in which they can learn to not be a Monday quarterback and having hindsight bias, that is, information they now have that they didn't have at the time, in order to avoid some of the guilt and shame that goes along with it. How do they realign their values if there have been moral injuries given that trauma? So you have physical, interpersonal, emotional. And then closely related to that is the cognitive and behavioral domains. The cognitive behavioral domains have to do with the degree to which we are all storytellers, and insofar as we can help people develop a new narrative, to restory, to redraw, to reauthor. In fact, one of the things that becomes fascinating in this area is the power of RE words and verbs. If you look at and listen to people tell their story, you can count the number of times they use these RE verbs in terms of their particular accounts. In fact, in the book Roadmap to Resilience, I have a whole variety of these words. So when someone asks you, how are things going, you say, I'm really glad you asked me. And then what you can do is choose one of these RE verbs and say, well, I'm actually rebuilding my strength. I'm recharging my batteries. I'm regulating my emotions. I'm trying to renew my connections. I'm reprioritizing my values. And then what you have to do is give people examples of how you're doing those things. It's the power of language. How can we not be lived by the stories, but become the author of the stories that we tell? And therefore, you could also engage in what is the nature of the behaviors that you engage in. The degree to which you participate in making a gift, the way in which you share your story with others, the way in which you honor those who have died, the way in which you memorialize, the way in which you engage in future problem solving, having a more optimistic outlook. And then finally, as I noted, the major way that people cope is often by some form of spirituality. And you can have either positive spiritual coping techniques, or you could have negative spiritual coping techniques that backfire. So on the negative side, the degree to which you're angry, anger gets in the way of the healing process. The degree to which you have a set of beliefs that feel that you've been picked on, that you become angry towards whoever your God or faith may be, the degree to which the religious community may exacerbate the situation. Those are all negative examples of spiritual coping. On the positive side, there are many ways in which you can identify your values, find meaning. Many look upon a higher being like God as a social support agent. Insofar as you can engage in prayerful behaviors, go through various spiritual rituals, attend services with others, memorialize, they all act as positive ways of coping. So the bottom line is that there's no one way to be resilient, and those people who fall in the 70% group tend to use some combination of these domains. Keep in mind that even though you're resilient at one time, you can have setbacks. There can be anniversary effects. And that should all be looked upon as part of the recovery process, rather than occasions to catastrophize or to think that there's no hope or feel helpless. It's a remarkable story, whether you're looking at cancer survivors, people who've lived through the Holocaust, prisoners of war, people who've been through natural disasters, violent acts. The bottom line is that when you look at people over the course of their lives, they give inspiration, they show true grit, and they provide us with lessons that we could all learn from. I hope that gives you a flavor of what I call the rest of the story.
It does. Thank you. Before we wrap up, I appreciate you talking with us today. Before we wrap up, is there anything else that you would like to tell people or you think people should know?
Well, I think that there's a need, no matter how much people are hurting at this moment in time, given the events that they've been through, to keep in mind that they are storytellers, and they tell themselves stories, and they tell other people stories, and the stories they tell can influence how well they do. I hope that this little segment of our recording will help people better appreciate how they could restory their lives.
This sounds great. It sounds great. Well, I appreciate talking to you, and people can go to the Melissa Institute's website, the Melissa Institute for Violence Prevention, which is www.melissainstitute.org, and also find some resources and also learn more about your book at www.roadmaptoresilience.org. So thanks a lot.
Thanks for the opportunity to chat with you.
Yeah, it was good talking to you.
Visit the podcast at www.mentalhealthday.org. And we really don't broadcast from the G. Stanley Hall, right?
Where is the Genie Stanley Hall? Malfunction, 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 malfunction.
The podcast is over, unless, like me, you'd like to picture a 6-year-old doing the robot dance.